In this lesson, we're going to learn about capacity. We're going to find out how to draw a gallon man and how to use him to convert from different units. So in order to start drawing him, I'm going to draw one big rectangle. And I'm going to split it into 4 rows. The very top row represents a gallon. From there, I'm going to break it into 4 pieces, the bottom 3 rows. And the next row under gallon, the 4 pieces represent quarts. And you can remember that there are 4 quarters in a dollar. There are 4 quarts in a gallon. So there are 4 quarts in 1 gallon. From here, I'm going to take the bottom 2 rows and I'm going to split them in half again. So on this 3rd row, I've now created 8 pieces, and those 8 pieces are pints. So there are 8 pints in 1 gallon. And I can also look at the relationship from quarts to pints. There are 2 pints in a quart, and if I have 4 quarts, 2 pints times 4 quarts would be 8 pints. So that's why there are 8 pints in a gallon. And on this bottom row, I'm going to split these in half one last time, which is going to create 16 pieces. And these 16 pieces are 16 cups. So, in a whole gallon, there are 16 cups. And the reason I like to draw a gallon man this way is I can use my fingers to slide up and down on the chart to find the relationship between different units. So I can look and see that there are 2 cups in 1 pint, but there are 4 cups in a quart. So if I wanted to figure out if I have 6 cups, just by sliding up on my chart, I know that's the same as having 6 cups is the same as having 3 pints. And if I scoot up one more row, that would be like having a whole quart and then half of a quart. So that is how we're going to use gallon man to go from one unit to the next. Now, my final point down here is that a gallon equals 4 quarts, or it could equal 8 pints, or it equals 16 cups. I'm going to start by drawing Gallon Man again, and I'm going to use him to help me answer these 3 problems. So here's my giant rectangle. I'm going to split it into 4 pieces. The top is a gallon. Now I'm going to split all the rows into fourths. So those are my quarts. I'm going to split them in half again to make 8 pints. And my bottom row is split again, and I've now created 16 cups. So our first example says 2 gallons equals how many pints? So first thing I want to notice is I'm starting with a gallon and I'm going to pints. A gallon is big and a pint is little. And the way we convert is if I'm going from a big unit to a little unit, we call that BLT. This is going to be multiplying. So with multiplication, 2 is going to get multiplied, and so my answer for pints should get larger. So now I want to look at the relationship between a gallon and a pint. So under gallon, for 1 gallon to be made, I need all 8 pints. So if I have 2 gallons, I'm going to do 2 times 8, and that equals 16. So if I have 2 gallons, that is the same as having 16 pints. Alright, Alright, now let's try and go from quarts. My next example says I have 7 quarts and I want to change that to cups. Well, a quart is bigger than a cup, so a quart is big and it's going to a little unit, so this is BLT. Again, this is going to be multiplication. And I know I have 7 quarts, so I'm going to multiply 7 by something. So now I want to look at the relationship between 1 quart and figure out how many cups I need to make a quart. So if I look right here, I have 1 quart and I scroll down to cups. Inside of this 1 quart, there are 4 cups, 4 little pieces. So if 1 quart has 4 cups, I want to multiply by 4 to figure out how many cups are in 7 quarts. So 7 times 4 is 28 cups. So if I have 7 quarts, that's the same as 28 cups. Our third example has 5 pints, and they want me to change pints to quarts. Well, I know that a quart is big. It's bigger than a pint. So I'm actually moving to a bigger unit, which means I'm starting at a little unit. And this is LB, little to big unit, D, division. So I'm going to be dividing here. And I know it's going to be 5 that gets divided. So if I have 5 pints, I want to look at the relationship between pints and quarts. So when I have a quart needs 2 pints. So the relationship between quart and pints is the number 2. 2 pints are in a quart. But because I have 5 pints, I need to take the 5 pints and divide it by 2. Or I could scroll up with my fingers on my chart and find that if I had all 5 of these pints, that would make 2 whole quarts. And then notice it cuts this quart in half. So I can solve this with an algorithm, and I'm going to solve it up here where I have room. This is 5 divided by 2. Well, I know that 2 can go into 5 twice, and 2 times 2 is 4. With 5 minus 4 is going to leave 1 pint left over. So there's several ways I can answer this problem right now. I could say that I have 2 quarts with 1 pint left over. Or I could turn this into a fraction, 2, and then my remainder becomes my numerator. The denominator is 2. So I could also refer to this as being 2.5 quarts. And the other way I could have solved this is instead of as a fraction, I could have used a decimal. So after I subtract, I would have added a decimal and zeros. And 2 goes into 10 5 times. And I know that 2 5/10 is the same as 2.5, which is also the same as having 2 whole quarts and 1 pint. Let's try a few more examples. Once again, I'm going to go ahead and draw a gallon man. So my rectangle, 4 rows. This is a whole gallon. 4 quarters in a dollar, so 4 quarts are in a gallon. I'm going to split in half and create 8 pints. And the last row, I need 16 cups. Alright, so my first problem says 11 cups, and I want to know how many quarts that is. So I always want to check if I'm going from a little to a big unit or a big unit to a little unit. Well, a cup is smaller than a quart, so quart is the big unit, which means I'm starting from a little unit. This is LBD, little to big, divide. So I know this is going to be 11 divided by something. So now I want to look at the relationship between cups and quarts. So when I have a quart, I need 4 cups. So the relationship is 4. So if I have 11 cups, I need to divide it into groups of 4. And I'm going to come down here to do 11 divided by 4. 4 will go into 11 2 times, which is 8. And 11 minus 8 is 3. So right now what I've done is I've created 2 whole quarts. And 3 is my remainder, which means I could call this 2 quarts and 3 cups. My other option is if I want to do this in terms of quarts, I can make it a fraction, or I could also make it a decimal. As a fraction, I would make the remainder 3 my numerator, and my denominator would be 4 because I need 4 cups to make a quart. So I could say my answer is 2 3/4. The other option would be, rather than turn this into a fraction, would be make it a decimal. So I would add a decimal and some zeros and raise your decimal to the roof. After I subtract, I need to bring down that 0. 4 goes into 30 7 times. 7 times 4 is 28. I subtract, I get 2, bring down the next 0. 4 will go into 25 times, and that will be perfectly even. So I could say that my answer is 2 3/4, or 2 quarts and 3 cups, or as a decimal, this would be 2 75 hundredths quarts. So I have several options as far as changing from unit to unit. All right, our next example is going from pints to gallons. So I'm going to look at pints and I'm going to look at gallons. A gallon is bigger, so this is little to big. This is LBD, this is division again. So this time I have 12 pints and I'm going to divide it up. And I do want to point out too that I also, on my last example, if I had put my finger from 1 cup and counted down to 11, so let's see, that would be 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, and slid this up, it would show that that took up 2 quarts, and this took up about 3/4 of that quart. So similar way, without using the algorithm. So now I'm going to use 12 divided by, and I'm going to look at the relationship between a pint and a gallon. So in order for pints to make gallons, I need 8 of them. So the relationship between a pint and a gallon is 8. So this is going to be 12 pints divided into groups of 8. So I'm going to start with 12 divided by 8. It will go into 1 time. So right now I've just made 1 gallon. 12 minus 8 is 4. So I could say that I have 1 gallon and then I have 4 pints left over. Or I could go a step further and say this is a fraction. This is 1 and 4 pints out of 8, which in simplest form, 4 and 8, that would be 1/2. So I could say this is the same as having 1.5 gallons. And I also know that if I wanted to make this a decimal, I would just need to add a decimal and some zeros. 8 will go into 45 times evenly. So as a fraction, this would be 1.5. Or I could say it's 1 gallon and 4 pints. Or this is 1 5/10 gallons. And I'm going to erase this to do my scratch work again. This example wouldn't be as useful to use the chart like I did a minute ago where I moved from 1 unit up and down. Since I have 12 pints and my chart only shows 8, I could look and say that I know if I have 8, that makes a gallon. And then I could look at, now if I just had 4 pints, that would make up about half a gallon. And then I could add a whole and a half together. But using BLT and LBD with the algorithm will also get you that answer. Our last example is going from quarts to pints, and a quart is the bigger unit. So starting at a big unit, I'm going to move to a little unit, BLT. This is going to be multiplying. So I'm going to do 7 quarts times the relationship number. So now I want to look at the relationship between quarts and pints. So here's a quart. When I have a quart, that's the same as having 2 pints. So the relationship between quarts and pints is 2. So I'm going to do 7 times 2. And I know 7 times 2 is 14. So if I had 7 quarts, I would have 14 pints. And that makes sense because 4 quarts has all 8. And then if I added 3 more quarts, that would add 6 more pints. And 6 plus 8 would also give me 14. So I can use Gallon Man in a variety of ways. You could move your fingers up and down on the chart to move from one unit to the next. But I do want to double check my work with BLT or LBD to decide if it's multiplication or division. Now try these practice problems. Remember that you're going to need to draw your Gallon Man. And if you need to rewind on the video to review how to draw the pieces, you can do that as well. So here's what your Gallon Man should look like. And I also want you to make sure that you're asking, is this BLT? Am I going from a big unit to a little unit? Then there should be multiplication, or your answer should be getting bigger, the number should be getting larger. If I'm going from a little unit to a bigger unit, this is going to be division, and your number should be getting smaller. You can also use the chart to move your fingers up and down as you convert from one unit to the next.